for cold, hard sports talk with your hosts, Ty Gore, Matt Barrett, and Jake Woods.
Alrighty, we are joined with our guest, Satoshi Takano. He is an NHL Cognition Developer and the Executive VP and co-founder of the Gordie Howe Research Institute. Satoshi, how is it going?
Good, thanks. How are you guys?
Good.
We're doing good. Wanted to dive right in here. First thing I want to ask is if for any of our listeners who haven't followed along with you like I have, can you describe what an NHL Cognition Developer is?
So thanks for having me, by the way. This is really cool. Been kind of following you guys as well, as much as you guys are following us. So couple of things that kind of, resonates with a lot of people. So we know that the game of hockey and even the game of life is kind of changing pretty quickly, right? So we see that the speed is changing, the times of which people are having to increase their hockey IQ is increasing. Like it's there's a lot of things that are changing in the game today. And so one of the things that really kind of caught my attention over the years is the ability for a player to think and make decisions. And we call it, from a general perspective, it just feels like it's getting faster. But if you really kind of break it down, it's the speed of which people are solving problems is getting much faster. And that's why you're seeing the game translate to much faster speed. So if you look at any of the elite players out there, it's not about, how big you are anymore. Like, it's not about whether you're a bodybuilder and, doing these massive lifts and everything else, although that's important. I think there's a third kind of leg to the stool, which is cognition and their ability to think. And so that's where my expertise lies right now. And of course, it's also for other things in life too, right? So whether you're driving a car and you have to look at the rear view mirror, you've got to look at the side view mirrors when you're making a lane change, like all of that is decision making, right? And your ability to see and think and process and then move. So for what we're doing right now is also, outside of just, pro players and NHL players and we're now into other sports. Like we have an Olympic fencer that's working with us as well. The sport of fencing is probably even faster than hockey. Like I when I watch these matches for some of these fencing events, like I don't even know what's going on because it's just so fast. And so we have other soccer players as well. We've got some volleyball players. So anything that involves speed is something that we're heavily into. And this was all the result of some other research that I was doing over and above just the cognitive stuff. And we're now into doing some other projects as well. We have a kind of what we call an Interstellar Project, which is involving us going to space and Mars and that kind of stuff. So that's a little bit like beyond like the scope of this conversation, but we have a lot of fun doing it because we see that with the use, we're seeing the biggest growth, right? So, great to have, NHL players and pro players and so on, but they're already at a certain level. And obviously they're occupied by other things as well, in terms of playing their sport and earning their keep. So whereas with the youth players, we're having tremendous amount of fun and progress, and we're seeing the growth. And so I would say for the next 6 years, at least 5 or 6 years, as these kids start to move into their draft year, getting into more of a serious level of hockey, that's where we're going to get really excited, because all of the development that we've done with, say, like 10 or 11-year-olds, we can start to kind of track over time. So that's kind of some of the things that we're working on right now.
Yeah. And you see, even in the NHL, like one quote I remember from Nathan MacKinnon when he was first making the step to the NHL, from the QMJHL was how he had such less time to be able to make the plays. And when you boil that down to its essence, that's where the cognitive training comes in. He has one less second to make a play. So being able to intake all the information around him, process it to think about what the best play would be, and to be able, the ability to execute at that speed is what makes McKinnon such a phenomenal player. The same goes for any great player in the NHL. Like the difference between a Connor McDavid and maybe an Andreas Athanasiou is they're both lightning fast, but McDavid can think as fast as he can skate. So when he's in those moments, he can process the information and find the best play to do. So
Yeah,
like some of our listeners know, I've been coaching since young age. I got in at like 14, started head coaching at 17, and right when I was starting to kind of get serious about coaching, Satoshi's one of the guys who I started following along, and there wasn't really anyone else doing like training and drilling consistently to improve cognitive development. So what kind of was like your inspiration getting into that? Like what was like the thing where it's like, hey, if we start like actually drilling this, then we could see big improvements like on the field and on the ice?
Yeah. So, so to your point, your earlier point about McDavid and McKinnon, if you watch their game, it almost looks like they're playing against like 5-year-olds, right? Like younger kids. And
For sure.
there was a goal that McDavid scored. It was like a couple days ago. I think it was who was it? Like he was just McDavid was on the wing and he gets the puck and he just it was like in slow motion. He gets the pass and then he explodes and he goes and scores his goal. Like it was on the left side, and it was one of these like plays that he just looked like he's playing against kids, and I think the McKinnon's probably the same, that everybody moves slower in their worlds. It's like when we played against little kids as well, when we're coaching on the ice, like we know like where the kids are going to be and where the stick's going to go and what kind of move we can do. It's that, right? Like that is what we're trying to develop with our players, is that all of a sudden it's like they feel that there's so much time and space around them because everybody's moving slower, because their brain is actually moving a lot quicker than anybody else. And so that's why I'm not discounting like your time you spend in the gym and you're working on your skill, because you're still going to need that. But hey, if you felt like you're like the world is moving slower to you, then all those things kind of come together. So that's what we're trying to develop. And same for we've got a baseball player as well that's training with us, and he's telling me straight out, like he's able to see 95-mile-an-hour fastballs to the point where he can see the stitches on the ball. That's crazy, right? So
I'm guessing that makes it easier to hit,
right? So that's the kind of feedback we get, and we've got some top OHL players here as well, and they're saying it literally feels like they're the world around them is slower, right? So so that's when I hear that type of input, then I know we're onto something. Now to your question about how it all started, so I have a son as well that plays hockey, and he's playing out of Notre Dame right now, and in Saskatchewan, sorry. And
shout out.
Yeah, absolutely great school. And growing up, he was one of those players that had a lot of skill and had a lot of speed, but he was small. And he's probably one of the smallest kids like in the league, like every year. And so we needed to work on something that would help him distinguish himself, because obviously he's working on skill. He went to the gym, he did everything that he was supposed to do by every coach's standard, but he was a small player. And so we focused on not just game situational drills on the ice, but creating unpredictable game situations on the ice. And I think that's where a lot of the coaches kind of miss the opportunity, which is create some stimulus that is still applicable to the game, but is unpredictable. And I don't know any trainer that really focuses on just that, right? And so 4 years ago, I started using fit lights on the ice. I don't know if you guys are familiar with fit lights, but they're probably one of the original ones that we all see on Instagram and stuff, where it's all reaction and providing that stimulus. So I started with those. I started taking them on the ice, and I learned a whole, the ups and downs of having them on the ice. Things get knocked over, like things are breaking all over the place. Some kids are hitting all, banging on this stuff. And so I started like using like, construction cones on the ice, and I attached them onto Velcro. And here I am like hauling a cart into the rink, and with all these like 10 construction cones and putting the fit lights on them. But what I started to realize is that when you provide that type of stimulus, you're creating some unpredictability, but still under with a kind of you still frame the drill. And so I'll practice things like getting out of the defensive zone, working into the neutral zone. Then what do you do in the offensive zone? So I break that into those three parts, and then I have the lights kind of directing the player accordingly. And so that's how I started. And people thought that I was crazy, right? Like they're like, well, what are you doing chasing lights and stuff? And I said, it's not about the lights. It's not about the lights. It's about, they're just a tool. It's really how we as coaches develop and creatively produce exercises and drills that are more game situational but unpredictable. So anytime you see coaches that bring on like cones and stuff, they're great, but there's no unpredictability to that, right? So that's how originally how I got started. And then I started kind of doing a lot of research in terms of how does the brain work, right? So I started kind of going down that road, and what's the stimulus? How do we react to it? How quickly do we see things? How quickly do we process information? So I started doing a lot of research then, and then I just started kind of doing my own kind of findings of, okay, so here's what I want, what kind of tools are out there in the marketplace. And I found like, a series of them, obviously fit lights and blaze pods and synaptics and all that is great. They're all out there. But what I realized is that they're not capturing a lot of the data now, right? So they're great for on ice, not really providing me with any feedback in terms of timing and speed and all those calculations that I need to make it even better. So I kind of take an engineering approach to this whole problem of hockey. So and then I come up with a couple hypotheses, and then I try to apply them, and then I see if I can prove myself correct or not correct. And so yeah, I mean, I never played in the NHL, I never played pro or anything like that, but my hypothesis at the time was I could probably make a lot of pros better by using proper science, right, and data. So I kind of took that approach, and so far just based on the data that I've collected, a lot of the elite guys are improving their cognition and reaction time by about 27%. So, and this is at the elite level. This is not even like younger kids or anything, but so we're starting to capture that now. We've got about 1.5 million points of data that we collect now, and so now we're able to do some analytics against it. My goal is to get around 50 to 100 million data points, and then I could start doing a lot of predictive analysis as well. So I can potentially see where kids are going to grow over time, and that's one of my goals, right? So yeah, so that kind of hopefully explains everything.
Did you have sort of a background in sort of like science or anything before this? Because you're obviously well versed in the science behind it. What did you do kind of before this? Was there a background of sort of engineering or some sort of science that you did before?
Yeah, so I've been involved in developing technology and selling technology. I'm not like an engineer like with the ring on my finger, but I love tech, right? I love what technology can do if you use it right. And so I'm an economics guy, I'm a business guy, but I'm all about charts and graphs and data and bringing different types of backgrounds together. And so, yeah, I'm not, I teach at Humber College in Toronto here. I've got about 800 engineers that I work with. And one area that I'm working with them on is within the area of wireless technologies. So, I often ask my own students about some of the technology that they're working on and that I may not know about, right? And so I'm also learning from them as much as I'm teaching them, and we combine forces and we start to figure out, we're building like APIs, we're building interfaces, we're building new types of technologies as well. That part of it is also government funded, and there's a lot of interesting stuff that the government's willing to also kick in as well in terms of government grants for research. So yeah, I'm one of those people that love to kind of move rocks and stuff and kind of look under them and kind of see what's there. And I'm finding that, hey, there's a lot still to be learned in this game of hockey. So yeah, that's my background.
Now, to like almost put a crude metaphor to it, I'm personally a big fan of like mixed martial arts and UFC and all of that. And every like decade or so, you'll see someone come up from a different background. Like we saw with like Ronda Rousey came up with the judo background. There wasn't a ton of like a high Olympic level judo athletes transitioning into UFC at the time. And then she uses that background to completely revolutionize. And then in the mixed martial arts aspect, people slowly start bringing that into all their arsenals. And then we see wrestlers who can do judo and Brazilian jiu-jitsu athletes who can do it and boxers who can do it. And then like every once in a while, like this new sort of like style or art comes in and slowly gets worked into all the styles. And that really feels like what's going on here. Like there's the experts in the physical training, there's the experts in the skating, there's the shooting experts. And now there's this new kind of training coming in and establishing as a way to improve everything else across the board and like kind of help synergize everything together in a way.
Right.
So that's kind of my view to kind of like put in simple terms, like what's going on here, at least how I see it.
Yeah. And so I used to work for a couple of tech companies based out of Silicon Valley, and one of the challenge with them is that a lot of engineers that are smart people, they're building great products and services, but nobody's making that connection in terms of, okay, is this what the market needs? Is this solving a problem? If you ever go to an Apple store is a combination of tech plus user experience, right? So if you go Steve Jobs is one of my favorite guys to kind of follow, like when I was younger, and he was always about that, like that Four Seasons hotel experience in a retail store, and that's what the Apple store is, right? So you take two very separate industries or backgrounds and you mash them together and you kind of see like what you can come up with. And I think that's the fun part, right? That's kind of the entrepreneurial kind of spirit that I've built over time. And I've always had a fascination for how does tech apply for life in general. How does it change? How does it make our lives easier? How does it make gathering information faster? So I've always been about kind of putting those together, and I think the cognitive stuff that we're doing every day, like, I mean, we have our group, standard group of tests that we do and protocols that we develop, but we're learning something new every time. We have when we have a goal, like a hockey goalie, it's a different type of training than what you would do for a player, or even if they're players, that you do different types of training for a forward versus a defenseman. Right. So I think it's a creative aspect of doing that. It's not just about the tools. I get asked every day about, the technology that we use. And I'm like, okay, that's great. But what you need is the creativity aspect of it. And, the equipment, a lot of this type of stuff is all, they're used in the Olympics and they're used by pro athletes, and they're very cost prohibitive. So I don't if you have the resources to do it, go buy the equipment. But what you're really missing is how to put it all together and then make it worthwhile for a lot of these athletes. So when the athletes come and work with us, they're with us for about an hour and a half to 2 hours just doing cognitive training, right? There's no lifting anything. There's no, they don't have to put this pressure on themselves or anything like that. And the beauty of it is the mind never gets tired. The body can get tired, but the mind never gets tired. So
I was actually just about to ask, that's like, do players ever, there's no fatigue that comes along with kind of like training and working their mind like this?
No. So when we find that the scores come down with the metrics that we're using, it's usually because they're either injured, or maybe they have a slight concussion, or maybe they do have a concussion, they don't even realize that they have a concussion. And so we can start to use the test as a marker to identify that maybe there's something wrong. So for some of the pros, we actually have a compressed program, which is a 3-day program. It's 4 hours a day, so they're with us for 12 hours over 3 days, and it's just purely on cognition, and they don't get tired, like I said, right? So we go 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon, a little bit of a break, and then we just keep going. So for those types of programs we have for people that are coming out from out of town, that can't stay in Toronto for that long, or they're just in for a very short period of time, right? So
see, that really interests me, because I was figuring like, okay, it would be just like a different kind of tired, because like sometimes like I do a Sudoku puzzle and then I need to lie down for a half hour afterwards. So I thought like, oh, they're working their minds, like they're still gonna need to like give a break. But that's really interesting to see. And I'm sure another factor is we see it at Edmonton a lot as a coach. I'm sure the issue's 10 times worse in the Greater Toronto area, and that's a lack of ice for all the people who want it. And to get on the ice and improve that way, or to get in the gyms and improve that way, it is just so expensive. Like, and there's just a finite amount of ice and hours to go around.
Yeah.
So if this is another way you can train, like we see a lot of times, like you just kind of training out of a garage or on the street, just like working on the reactions and all that stuff. So that's something that would be huge for the hockey world.
Absolutely. I think, we as coaches and parents, we all know, right, that there's only so much you can do on the ice for 50 minutes or an hour and a half or whatever it is. And you can only do certain types of exercises on the ice. And so what we've developed is something that we can do practically anywhere. And so we do take our equipment to some academies here in Toronto, with Everest. And there we've got about 150 athletes that we work with on a weekly basis, and they absolutely love it because we could take it to them, right? And we don't do it all the time, but yeah, during this whole COVID shutdown, like we just open up the garage and get some air in, and we go, and we've been doing it all summer, so it's been great. And the spring program is really starting to ramp up, and a lot of the pros are definitely looking to come back in the off season as well. So it's been great. Like, it's one of these things that, like I said, it's if only I had access to this, like when I played, like it'll be a whole different game, right? Like, because I was a defenseman, I was a small guy, and all I did was, hit people and hip check people. And it's all the stuff you can't do anymore. But now it's like, okay, you got to be a much, visually good player. You got to think, faster. You got to problem solve a lot faster, and really, really develop that hockey IQ, right? Which is the ability for you to solve a problem on the ice within, milliseconds. And the faster you can do that, then the more inputs that you can, take in, more information you can process, and you do it all over again. And so I think that's what coaches are looking for. I think that's what, general managers are now kind of looking towards. And we want to provide that data back to those coaches and the GMs that are making those decisions from a business aspect in terms of, okay, how much is this guy worth, right, over this guy? And aside from goals and assists and any other stat that you see today, why isn't cognition part of that formula? And so I'm kind of on this mission to kind of educate the industry on, okay, now we have a way that we can measure at a combine that, these guys can think at a quick level, these guys can see at a specific level, and make decisions. And so yeah, I think I'm excited about this kind of stuff because it doesn't cost them anything more, right, to include this into their equation. And but it only helps them. And so that's the other kind of journey that I'm on as well.
Yeah, you mentioned it there, having the combine aspect, because for other sports you get a bit of a better idea, like in the NFL combine, like pure strength and all that, the 40-yard dash is more direct translation to what happens on the ice. But then we see stuff where like fourth overall pick Sam Bennett can't do a pull-up at the combine, but it's like, does that matter? Does that take away any of his value as a hockey player? But like stuff like this, where it's like, if a fourth overall pick is thinking at a significant rate slower than a guy ranked to go seventh, that could legitimately warrant moving a guy up multiple spots in a draft, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's something that I found very interesting as well. And I was actually going to ask you about it if you didn't bring it up yourself, because that's like something I see. Like when I was like talking about you to Mama Woodsy, one of our big friends of the podcast, listens to every episode. I was describing you as like someone who's 10 years ahead of the game. So like the stuff you're doing now is the stuff we're going to be seeing all the NHL athletes training as in 10 years. And I know, like you mentioned, as a defenseman, you would have been better having this back in the day. I know as a goalie, if I could see the logo on a puck when a 95-mile-an-hour slap shot's coming at me, I probably would have stopped a few more.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the goalies are phenomenal. Like, I mean, the stuff that we're doing with some of them, it just blows my mind that they're moving at the speed that they do, and it only forces us to get better at the exercise that we throw at them. And yeah, man, like I've got the data to prove it. Like it's fascinating. And to the other point about this argument about do you play multiple sports, do you play one sport? I can tell you with the data, like multiple sports is the way to go. Like it is, like bar none, right? So because we see them in the tests that we do, and we do the same test, whether it be whether you're a baseball player or a hockey player, and yeah, multiple sports is 100,000% the way to go. If you can have the time and the resources to shuttle around between sports and so on. Outside of that, like you're building a lot of skills that are going to translate. And so I can't be a bigger proponent of that for sure.
I was going to ask you that, like the playing different sports, like obviously baseball players, that's hand-eye coordination and quick reaction time, etc. And as a kid, I played almost every sport imaginable. I wasn't very good at all of them, but nevertheless, you learn how to do different things in different sports, right? Rather than you're playing hockey and this skill isn't quite as good, right? It does the same with your brain.
Yeah, 100%. And whether you decide to race cars for a living after playing hockey, there's still transferable skills, right? And it shows. Like I see it in the data. Like it's unreal. Like baseball players, same thing. So when I have the Olympic fencer here, her ability to see is off the charts, right? Like we've done on the first session with her, I mean, we threw some difficult challenges at her from a visual standpoint, but she sees everything. But that's how she's conditioned. Now, if you take that type of skill set and then transferred it into hockey, I'm sure she could probably be an awesome goalie, and she could see a lot of the pucks coming at her, and kind of doing tip-ins and all that because she's seeing the puck. Like it is absolutely so transferable. And it's something that it's definitely recommended just based on the data that we've seen so far. Yeah.
And now, just as we're kind of wrapping up here, one question I wanted to ask: just is there anyone you've worked with who just like has like wowed you with how fast they can think? Maybe any of these OHL players we can keep an eye on in the future. Maybe snagging our fantasy leagues before everyone else catches on to how good they are.
That's like that. That's like the Back to the Future, the second one, second or third. Right? Where you have the playbook and the almanac. Yeah, I mean, I can certainly tell you with a lot of the guys that are here, and you know, I'm not going to mention names because you guys can all see it on Instagram. But all the guys that are working with us now, 100,000%. They just keep getting better and better, and it shows in the game, by the way, right? So I watch every game that all of my guys play, and I see it. I see the difference, and it, you know, we got you know, Frankie Corrado that's been playing. You know, he's now in Sweden. You know, he's putting points on the board. We had you know, a couple other guys that are down in the US. They're putting points on the board. I mean, it's yeah. I mean, I wish that there was a way to say this is the one, you know, that changed everything. But I can definitely see that difference. So I think if anyone, one of your listeners is listening to this, like whether you do it with me or whether you do it somewhere else, add cognitive development to the formula, and you'll see your player transform like you never have. So I'd highly recommend it.
Awesome. One thing I wanted to ask was, is there a certain level or age group or, you know, something like that where you see the biggest effect or the biggest change in players doing this kind of stuff?
Yeah. So I always tell people the earlier the better. So we've had kids that are, the youngest that we have is 2012. So I think they're 9.
Yep.
Right. And at around that age is when they start to, you know, kind of get into their own, right? And so obviously it just depends on the maturity level, but to them, they just come and play games. Like they don't realize what they're doing. Half these kids actually, you know, it doesn't matter how old they are, they half the time they don't even know why they're here, but they just have a lot of fun doing it. And they keep getting better and better. They keep breaking their own personal records, and they get faster, and we measure everything. And we have this massive whiteboard here where we track everybody that's been here. And then so the kids get to see, you know, some of the other, you know, NHL guys and say, hey, I'm faster than Pavel Barber or whatever, right? Like, you know, they can see that because they've been here, and then we can measure that. So, I mean, we just keep it fun for them. But where we start to see the real growth right now, so I think it's about 2006. 2006 would be 14, 15.
Yeah, Bantam age.
14, 15. Yeah.
That U15 age.
Exactly. So that's when a lot of the physical attributes start to kick in, and then they're able to get to things much quicker and process quicker, and their brains are developing. So I think that's about the age where we start to see that all that come together. But I mean, a lot of parents, they send me messages and say, hey, I've got a 9-year-old, you know, 10-year-old, is that okay? And I'm like, that's when you want to do it, right? Because this is a marathon. So, you know, all of my sessions right now is not just a drop in. It's a program. It's a 10-week program. And so they're with me for, you know, once a week or twice a week. And they're here for, you know, anywhere between 5 to 10 weeks. And usually we see the improvement within about the third session. Whereas, you know, you can do the same type of practice on the ice and you won't see it for a long time, right? So to me, it's that, you know, that minimal effort, maximum effect. And I think this is probably one of those things that that most parents kind of overlook. And I think it's something that should definitely be included in part of their development.
Now, if any of Gorsey, go.
Sorry about that.
No
so for just one quick question, without giving away the secret sauce here. So for any like 13, 14-year-old listening who wants to take the next step up, play AA, AAA, have a chance at competing in a bantam draft, is there one drill that they should do at home or anything like
or
that?
like anything they could do at home, right?
Yeah, real anything at all that would you would say would help them start to reach that next level?
So with what we do, we break it up into really three or four parts, right? So we have what we call, seeing the stimulus, processing the information, making your decision, and then moving, right? So let's break it into four pieces. So there's exercises that you can do just for your vision, right? We have an online app as well that's accessible through mybrainspeed.com. They can sign up there, and we have our cognitive program, which is actually the same program that we do in the physical space, but it's in the online space. So the exercises are exactly the same. So their ability to see at, say, 20 milliseconds, 25 milliseconds is key. Anything that provides that type of quick flash stimulus is good. So whether you do blaze pods or whether you do fit lights or anything like that is always helpful. And also kind of just working on looking through your periphery, right? And really just kind of seeing, like, sometimes in the room, like I notice the most when there's a fly in the room, right? And you're talking to somebody, and maybe you're doing this podcast, and then there's a fly in the room, and you just see it out of the corner of your eye, right? And it's there. And that type of thing is just a quick demonstration of the fact that you can actually see things in your periphery. And the key also for all hockey players out there is to apply what you're learning. Don't just come here and train with us or anyone else and just come for the training and then don't make that translation to the ice. So we have particular exercises that we do here where they're, chasing a certain type of symbol. And now, they've come and trained with us enough that we can speak in code, right? We can say, hey, remember you saw that, green box, which is the symbol that we use as a chase symbol. And the player would say, oh yeah, I remember that, right? So now I say, okay, go and chase the green box when you're shooting at, at the net. You're looking for an opening, which is that green box, right? Or maybe it's a red 9 or whatever the symbol is that we used here. We then translate back onto the ice. And so when you make a pass, it's a red 9. If you, take a shot, it's a red 9. You're moving to a red 9. Like, so it's all that is now we just have to make sure we can translate that to the ice. But anything, if I think there's a couple other apps that we've used that we've seen, which I think one of them is like Switched On, which I think is a good one, where you've got the app and you're kind of moving to certain locations on the ground, and you've got some agility type exercises. So anything that stimulates for you to see the periphery is always a good one.
Awesome. Now, if any of our listeners want to follow along with what you're doing, see this training and see how you do it, where on social media can they follow you at?
So I'm on Instagram. So Satoshi _Takano. That's probably the best way to get in touch and see a lot of the stuff that we do. And hopefully, if anyone's in Toronto, feel free to drop by and we'll go take you through an assessment, and we'll show you how quickly you can react and see and your power output and all that good stuff. So it's all there.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Satoshi, for coming on. It was awesome to talk to you. I love hearing about this stuff. I love hearing about different ways to train and different ways athletes are getting better.